Niners versus Steelers. Let's go through the top players from each team and do a mock-up of the winning lineup. This is for Week 1 Showdown Captain Mode. Let's get started. CMC Christian McCaffrey is definitely going to be the most expensive player in any Captain Showdown this week, and that's because he's an explosive player. He gets good numbers, he can also catch the ball and get into the red zone. He had one game that was under 10 points last year, but if you look at his highest yield, he can get up to 40 points. So it really depends on the matchup, and the Steelers are quite tough, but people still put him on their lineup because he is expected to get a lot of touches. This year, the Niners will look to have Brock Purdy as their quarterback. We also have Sam Darnold. I would actually expect Purdy and Darnold to be sharing time in the first game. This is something that Niners tend to do. But on the other hand, you do have to remember that the wide receivers or even Christian McCaffrey might catch the ball, and that comes from a quarterback. So it's still good to consider to have any of the quarterbacks on your lineup. George Kittle costs almost $9,000 as a flex, and he still is questionable. So I wouldn't really want to look at him, but George Kittle, he does make a good connection with Purdy, as well as all the other guys on his team. Deebo Samuel is a hot player. A lot of people would say that he's gonna not be catching many balls this year, and you should look into Ayuk a little bit more, or any of the other guys, that might be catching the ball when they are blocked out by the other team. The other running back, Elijah Mitchell, is also really good, and if he does play instead of Christian McCaffrey, then you're going to see that more usage on him, just getting the ball downfield, which is something that Niners always like to do. So the Niners actually had trouble with the kickers this year, and they've been releasing some. They had some that were on injured reserve, so what you're looking at now is Jake Moody to take the play on Sunday. In these type of matchups, kickers are actually medium risk and high reward, so I would consider that, especially if they're not getting a much touchdowns, field goals happen, and you just hope that the kicker can actually make it in. If Kittle doesn't play, you're going to want to look at the other tight ends. They're going to have a couple of players rotating as Kittle's backup, but they're not Kittle, so their usage might be less, but if they do catch the ball and help you, especially if they don't cost as much, that is a good consideration to put them in the lineup. Some other wide receivers that we can look at is Jennings and Bell. So Jennings is 3rd on the depth charts and Bell is 4th. I would consider Jennings or Bell depending on who fits in my salary cap. Bell is somebody who's just replacing a lot of the people who got injured over the preseason. And then you can expect some of the other guys on this list to be on the special teams. So kind of be careful on that and look who is actually playing. So both the Niners and Steelers are pretty good defensive teams. If you look at their stats, the 49ers on average when they are away, they are a little bit less, around 6 points. Home games, they do much better, around 11 points. And if you look at the matchers with the Steelers, you're expected to see more coverage, more plays, and they're going to try really hard, especially if they can get their top guy back, right? That's a concern as well. The Steelers get around average points. Now, the idea here is that if the Steelers are better offensively this year, that means that, their defense team is going to get better as well. Because sometimes when they're always on the field because their offensive team can't hold it in, they're just going to get really tired at the end, and their other team is going to keep scoring against you, and therefore you lose your points. And that's where you saw -1, 2, 3, 4 points, really, really low there. So I would look into and wait a little bit, maybe next week, and put them on there. But, if they do well, if they do pick sixes, if they actually sack and do all of that, and if their offensive team is doing what they're doing, then Steelers is actually quite a good consideration. Moving on to the kicker on the Steelers team, you have Chris Boswell. He can generate some decent numbers. His ownership may be a little bit higher because he is really low cost, and he is going to guarantee to get you at least 1 or 2 points, usually even more than that, so that's good. We saw a bit of action from Kenny Pickett during the preseason. As the Steelers' top quarterback on the depth charts, fans are really excited. When he is on the field, his fantasy points average around 12. That is pretty good considering that we can guarantee some points coming from him. Najee Harris is still RB1, but some people are looking at Warren, who might take some of his points away. I think that Warren will play more of a supporting role, while Harris will still have the main role. And if you look at Harris's points when he is healthy, when he is on the field, if the Niners allow him to run, then we're going to see some decent numbers and usage from him. If you look at Warren's stats, especially during the preseason and even last year, he does generate some really decent numbers. Just depends on what you think will happen. I'm going to be a little bit biased because Freiermuth is always one of the reliable players, especially when he's not injured. He's there, he can catch the ball, he can get down, so that's really, really good. One of my favorite pass catchers on this team. The other good tight end options are Hayward and Washington. Washington is actually second on their depth charts. Hayward is actually third, but you know what? Either or, depending on who's open at the time and who can catch it, you can get some decent points. These are guys that you can use as the filler spot, especially if you're trying to get all the expensive players on your lineup. Diontae Johnson at wide receiver 1 is a highly targeted player. You can see he gets up to 10 targets a game. That's really high, and if he can get a touchdown, it's great. Usually he doesn't. Now that's actually what happens with his fantasy points. If you look at his stats from last year, he hasn't had a touchdown yet. It's bound to happen though, so I would consider him, but that's just something that I do want to note there. The next receiver we're going to look at is, of course, George Pickens. This guy can catch the ball, and that's actually really fun to watch as well. Targets, he gets half as many as Diontae Johnson, but his points are more because he's more touchdown happy. So is Diontae Johnson going to take it this year in this first week, or is George Pickens going to continue to take that away from him? We're also going to look at some of the other ones, which is Allen Robinson. This guy can get the ball as well. His average points, his games. Something that you want to look at too is if they are blocked from the 49ers, who has the next potential. So you would go down this list here and see who would do the best, and then fill it in, because these guys, some of them cost more because they have really, really good potential, and that's something that I always look at, the opportunity over anything else. Before we draft, let's select the fantasy heroes, breakout ballers, and questionable stars. Fantasy heroes in this game is going to be Pickens and McCaffrey. I expect them to be near the red zone, or at least in the touchdown area. The breakout ballers of this game would definitely have to be the kickers and the Steelers defense. They can go both ways. If they both do really well, I can see some high scores, and that's really good for Captain Showdown. As for the questionable stars, it's going to have to be George Kittle. He is a questionable player. He might not be playing in game 1. For the captain of this lineup, I am going to go with Christian McCaffrey. And then next, we're going to go ahead and go with Pickens. Throwing to George Pickens would be Kenny Pickett, and I'm also going to add Brock Purdy. Now, Purdy has a lot of wide receivers. If he does throw it to them, then he's going to get some decent points. And if he does throw it to McCaffrey in the end zone, then of course he's going to get some good touchdown points there as well. For the next position, we're going to add the kicker from the Steelers team, and then close it off, we're going to go back to the 49ers at the tight end, who's a backup for Kittle. Kittle might be playing, but he might not be playing the entire game, and that's something that I do look at as well. Do let me know down below who you think will win this game. Thanks for watching.